Welcome. I'm Kevin from the Academy for Teaching and Learning Excellence, and this workshop will walk us through the resources that faculty have for teaching in face-to-face classrooms and hybrid classrooms in fall 2020. As you can see on screen, you can also download these slides. Here are the topics we'll cover in this workshop today. As you can see, we'll look at what a classroom contains and then talk mostly about different ways that we should be doing the teaching and leverage the technology to reach both audiences. First, let's make sure we're all talking about the same things. A flexible hybrid, in this case, refers to a mix of face-to-face and live or online synchronous students in the same session. So that really means teaching to two audiences at the same time, simultaneous synchronous audiences. There are three modalities on campus this fall. AD is all distance, CL is classroom, that's your regular standard face-to-face, and students are expected to come to every class session at a CL class. HB means hybrid, and a flexible hybrid would mean that the students could watch at home or they could be in the classroom on that given day. And in fact, on any given day, students could decide that they're not going to be able to come today. Perhaps they're feeling sick or they have caught the virus themselves and will need to watch the class and participate in the class from home as an online audience member. So it also could be that there are some students who need to be given a rotational schedule, and that's something the faculty member would decide for when they are allowed to come to class. They can't just decide to come on any given day, although they could decide to stay home and be an online student on any given day. All right, we're going to start by looking at what is in the classroom now. So one of the things you'll see is that there's signage that leads the students down certain pathways. For instance, there are one-way corridors when possible. There are enter and exit doors when possible. But one of the things we have to say right up front here is that there's a lot of variation between the rooms. And what I'm going to show you might be representative, but is not going to be the case in every single classroom. So the facilities department has made a schematic of each room, and you can see that on screen here, where in this case it's taped to the back side of the front door of the classroom, where the dots refer to the places where students can actually sit. Some desks have been sort of taped off, and you can see that in the other picture there. In fact, there's tape on the floor as well, showing where those desks are supposed to be. Now, it probably goes without saying, but we'll say it anyway. We are not to rearrange these desks or move the furniture in any way. So there will be some new technology added to some rooms. Again, that there's going to be some variation between them. So all the rooms are going to be equipped with the items you see listed on the screen. A video camera aimed at the instructor, like a webcam, that will probably include a microphone directly in the webcam. There will be speakers that are sort of in the classroom so that the students in the classroom can hear the online students when they speak. And then there are student microphones, so audience-facing microphones in the room as well, so that the online students can hear the face-to-face students when they're speaking. There's an important caveat there. That is not true in the auditoriums. They are not putting microphones to capture the students in the face-to-face auditorium. That's too difficult. And finally, the Teams desktop app will be installed. So the two pictures you're looking at here are kind of more temporary kit-related items. So that's the speaker microphone that you see at the bottom of the screen, and then that's also the webcam that the faculty member can use to point at themselves or point to other students in the room or point to the whiteboard. So with the variability, we need to remember that there's not a monolithic answer to whether the faculty member is stuck in one spot or has the ability to walk around. Keeping in mind that physical distancing also refers to the faculty members, so they can't go up close to the students to begin with. In some rooms, there are going to be stronger microphones that capture audio, and so the faculty member doesn't need to be right next to the podium. And in some cases, there will be lapel mics in some rooms, but not in all of them. And so it really matters what room you're in and what you're allowed to do in terms of walking around. One of the biggest challenges we know that faculty are going to face is controlling the video streams. So let's talk about what life was like when it was just a face-to-face classroom. When you wanted to switch what the room was looking at, you would use the Crestron. It's a little screen that sits off to the side of the main computer. and you see it pictured on the left side of the screen. It's kind of cut off, but that's what it looks like. And it has the video feeds for PC, which is selected at the moment, laptop, doc cam, document camera, and the video mute, which just blacks out the screen. So in the pre-virus days, we would simply push that from, let's say, the PC to the document camera, and then we'd be done. Well, in the current hybrid classroom, we have to do things twice. We still need to switch what happens to the projector in the room, and that's still the Crestron. So we switch from PC to doc cam, and now the screen behind me is showing the document camera. But the online students aren't seeing that. The online students are seeing the webcam view of me, and they're not seeing the screen. So within Teams, and this is now the right-hand side of the screen, we need to click on those triple dots that you see near the top of the Teams interface. And then when that's pulled down, we would select Device Settings. So the device settings having been selected is now the screen that we are seeing. And there's always the audio device, so that's basically where where the speaker is coming from, the speakers themselves, the microphone, and then finally the camera. So I'm showing you what it looks like if you have a laptop with this screen, but it's going to look different when you're in the classroom, because the microphone might say something like Elmo has a microphone, and then the webcam has a microphone. The Elmo is the document camera, by the way. And then when it comes to camera, it might say webcam, or it might say Elmo, and that actually is where we would switch to the document camera, as we would go to the camera field, at the very bottom of this interface here, and switch it from saying webcam to saying Elmo. And then the students who are online would be able to see whatever the document camera is showing us. It is difficult to remember to switch both every time you're doing switching, and it's also important to remember that the defaults when you walk into the room might not be the way you want it. So it's something you really have to pay attention to at all points in the class. All right, let's talk about best practices when working with both audiences at the same time. So let's start with whiteboards. You may not be able to use a whiteboard in terms of whether the students online can see it. Some rooms have access to this. They have a camera mounted on the back wall, and they might have an ability to see what's on the board, but that's also subject to the pen, the marker being strong enough, the contrast being good, the lighting being good. It could be that your webcam is on a movable tripod, but generally the whiteboard is going to be difficult in most cases to reach both audiences. So we're suggesting instead that you use the document camera, or Elmo as it's called, it's the brand name. So it needs to be switched, as we just finished talking about, both on the Crestron for the live students and then in Teams for the students watching at home. Crestrons include the ability to zoom in and zoom out, and in fact, you need to make sure that it's not upside down when you walk into the room. Sometimes people flip these things around, so you might have to physically move the Elmo in the other direction so that it's not upside down. It's possible you might find it difficult to move away from the console. So even if the lavalier mic is available, you need to know that students can hear you at all times. And that is only half of the reason you might be stuck at the console, because you also want to check pretty frequently whether students who are online have typed questions into the Teams chat or they have their hands raised in Teams. And since this is difficult to remember to do, you get caught up in the moment teaching to the face-to-face students, it might be better simply to remain close to the console. And we'll talk about a method where you could sort of see everything on your screen all at once in a minute. So as we've been saying, the idea here is that the primary interaction will be through Microsoft Teams. We are encouraging Teams primarily because of some of its features, including the ability to capture live captions. And because Teams is a relatively new and developing product with us here, and it will be with us for some time, which may not be true of other interfaces that you might choose. So the possibilities here include that we would meet with students via our group, our class group, and then there's the option to click on the Meet button within the class group and then spawn the meeting from there. The way you get a class group within Teams is actually by starting in Canvas. So on the left side of your Canvas interface will be a button that says Microsoft Teams. It may or may not say Early Access by the time the fall semester begins. And you would click that and follow the prompts, and then it will eventually lead you to click a button, and then you would enter through Teams. You would need to then select the proper class team. These are called class teams, and if you've got 3 classes, you do this 3 different times, and then each time you do it, you would need to select the proper class team as you've done. And then an important thing, you need to click the Activate button. So there's a small picture at the bottom of the screen at the moment about what that looks like, the Activate button. In the actual Teams interface, it'll be in the top. It'll be in the top of that class team. So once you've got a class team, you can create a meeting. And so within Teams, you see on the screen in front of you that the left side navigation includes buttons for chat and assignments and so forth. And we want to click on the Teams one and select the proper team. You might have to click the All Teams button to move out of your current team and look at the team that you're looking for. Once you're in the team that you're looking for, you would click on the right-hand side, the big circle there where it says Meet, and you could either meet at the moment, but more likely you're going to schedule a meeting. Now, it is possible to schedule one meeting and use that same meeting all semester long for the students. However, it is possible that students could depart conversation, it's called, and then they might have trouble finding the meeting again. So whether you're doing one meeting or different Teams meetings across the semester, we do recommend that you put the links for those meetings into Canvas somewhere. So Canvas homepage or individual Canvas calendar events would actually be the most student-friendly way to do it. So Teams includes the ability to share your screen. So the circled item at the top of the Teams interface, that's got an arrow with the box around it, opens up the bottom part of the screen, which is the menu that you would use to select, well, what am I going to share? So you see one of the options is Whiteboard. We'll talk about that in a second. And the next option that down the line here is to share the PowerPoint directly, or you could share your entire desktop. So as it turns out, we're going to recommend that you share the PowerPoint if you're using PowerPoint rather than the whole desktop, so that you can also see the Teams chat and hands, and we'll show you that in a minute. So what you're looking at is exactly that interface of using PowerPoint, that's the main part of the screen, and Teams at the same time. So as you can see, I still have access to see the chat on the right-hand side of the screen. That's the Teams chat. And then across the bottom, I see one student has her hand raised at this moment, all while I'm still looking at the PowerPoint in the main part of the screen. Now, if the students had been shared only the PowerPoint, then for them, it's a full screen thing. They don't see Teams in the side here. But for me, I have entered into what's called windowed mode in PowerPoint. And so I can resize my window to only be a part of the screen, and therefore I can also see the Teams chat behind it. If I were to click somewhere in the Teams chat, I would no longer see the PowerPoint window at all. I'd have to get back to that window later on. So here's how you go to windowed mode. Within PowerPoint, you click on the Slideshow tab, and then you click on Setup Slideshow, which opens this box that you see in the middle of my screen. And when you first get there, it'll be the top selection there, which says full screen in parentheses. The second selection says window in parentheses. That's the one you would select and click OK. And now the next time when you run PowerPoint, it will be in a window like any other window, like a browser window, and you can resize it and move it around and do whatever. That's on your screen. What the students would see at home is it would still be full size, full screen for them. Another functionality of Teams I think we need to talk about is that they can chat with each other. So typewritten chat is what I'm talking about. And this could be a place where they ask questions and that you're going to return to every so often. It could also be that when they ask those questions, other students could answer them, right? So this could turn into what's called a back channel, that they're having a conversation between themselves. And you might want to just establish what your preferred ground rules are going to be in terms of whether they raise hands or whether they use the chat function to ask questions, whether you want them to answer each other's questions. It's all up to you, but you should probably make it obvious to the students up front. All right, we will have breakout rooms by the time the semester begins. As this recording is being made, they are not ready yet. So they will be part of the meeting. They're not part of the class team. They're part of each meeting. We don't know exactly where they're going to be. I think it's going to be, I've heard it's going to be at the top, like those near those same places where you see to mute yourself or to mute your camera. So it'll be a button up there somewhere. We've been told that they're going to be a simple button to separate them out into groups and tell them how many groups, and a single button to return them back to plenary, sort of collect them from the breakout groups. We don't know exactly what they look like yet exactly, but we hope that this will solve many problems where the students can be given breakout rooms within the Teams interface directly. So as it does say here on screen, Blackboard Collaborate Ultra is still an option. It's not going to be turned off this fall term. However, it's an older product, and we may not have that one as long as we're going to have Microsoft Teams. So if you're going to be creating things, especially if you're creating more permanent videos and those sorts of things, Teams is probably more of our future and is the preferred one, although Ultra is not banned. One of the things you can do within Microsoft Teams is poll the students. So this is like the old-fashioned clicker questions, right? And another option, in addition to poll, would be an app called Forms. They do similar things. The poll asks a simple multiple choice question. Forms allows them to select all that apply, for instance, and it's got some other more complicated ways of asking questions. So polls would be the simpler one. Now, where you find this is perhaps slightly confusing. The menu on the left-hand side, so activity, chat, teams, and so forth, is actually a separate window from the meeting that you're in with the students right now. So if you were to hover your mouse over the Teams icon at the bottom of the screen, this is assuming you're using a PC, you would see that there's two windows. One is the meeting and the other is this, the sort of the Teams client. So you'd have to select the Teams client, even though I'm in a meeting with the students, select the chat, and then choose which chat I want to talk to do this poll in. So that would be named after whatever your class team is named. Once I've selected that, I click on the triple dots at the bottom of that chat here. Now, it is true that over on the meeting itself, there is a chat bar and there is these triple dots, but they're not clickable on the meeting itself. If Microsoft fixes that, perhaps they will become clickable. As of today, you've got to go to this client side and click on those triple dots, and then you would be able to find the poll app. You would click it and activate it. Once it's activated, the poll app would then be next to those triple dots. It would be an icon down there. And as I said, you would just type the questions and then type the responses as a possibility. With poll, you'd have to do all of that basically in real time, or just have it ready to go before the class begins. Forms is easier because you can then schedule multiple questions, and you can do that ahead of time. All right, now we're going to switch to a different element about the fall 2020 classrooms, and that is physical distancing. And the problem is going to be, how do we be interactive when we're physically distant? So this applies to face-to-face classes as well as hybrid classes. First, the quick reminder of what that classroom is going to look like. Masks are going to be required, or face coverings are going to be required by both faculty and students. People have to be 6 feet apart, meaning the faculty are not really going to be moving between desks, approaching a single student. There are going to be room caps that students cannot, more than those students cannot come into the room. And faculty are going to need to be enforcer out of all of those things, enforcing that students are wearing masks, enforcing that the students are not too close to each other, and enforcing that there aren't too many students in the room today. So in terms of interactivity, we're going to look at noise as the primary problem. People are 6 feet apart, and that's going to mean that the room is going to be, it's going to be hard to do group work and hard to do partner work when people are 6 feet apart. And we also have, if it's a hybrid class, potentially students at home as well. So let's run through a couple of possible solutions when the students are sitting 6 feet apart and you want them to be interactive. One of them is basically, mentally throw up your hands and say, we're just going to do this anyway. Just go ahead and be loud. And what it turns into, we've test run it in this classroom you're looking at, is they end up getting louder and louder because they're trying to outshout each other and be able to hear each other. So it's not a perfect solution, and I will say that if there are online students, it's a total cacophony. And if you do it this way, it's loud enough that you can't outshout them when it's time to come back together. You're going to need to do something like flicker the lights to get their attention. A second solution is similar, except you're asking the students to murmur at each other, so talk softly while talking 6 feet apart. We actually tried this first by whispering and found it difficult to do while wearing masks, and 6 feet is too far away for a loud whisper. So that's why we went with murmur, sort of a soft voice. And we do think that it's likely too hard to do with entire groups, so probably you're doing this in pairs, partners only. And then the final thing that we found during the testing here is that the volume did rise in this mode as well over time. So the students' murmur became regular talking, and so the instructor needs to re-shush them back down every so often so that it stays quiet. Sort of a third solution, and I suspect many people will be using this one, is the BYOD, or bring your own device. So we're asking the students to participate with each other by using their cell phone, most likely, or a laptop, and therefore they can do the same things that the students online are doing if it's a hybrid class, and you really just intermix them that way. So we talked a minute ago about teams having breakout rooms, so one possibility is you just throw everyone into the breakout rooms, even the ones who are face-to-face today, and they interact that way. So they're basically typing to interact with other students rather than talking to interact with other students. It's a little bit awkward, particularly since we're here face-to-face, but it is part of the awkwardness of the semester. All right, we are now going to talk about what happens when everyone is wearing masks, because it changes more than you might initially think. As a reminder, everyone's got to be wearing these face coverings full-time when teaching. So the first sort of side effect masks provide is that they muffle the sounds. Things get harder to hear, things become less clear, and the volume goes down a little bit as well because of this muffling. So if the room does have a lapel microphone, we suggest you wear that, the lavalier mic. And we also suggest that you perform a sound check at the beginning of every class period. Make sure that the students can hear you face-to-face and that the online students can hear you as well. So what do we do about the muffling? Well, a couple pieces of advice. The first one is you just simply have to speak louder. You just have to be louder when you're talking to your students. And as they say in theater and so forth, you have to speak from the diaphragm, right? So it's not speaking from your throat, which is a smaller voice. And you should aim your chin up. So it's sort of you're aiming your voice at the back of the room rather than at the front. You almost have to imagine that gravity is grabbing your voice and doing a parabolic arc as it travels across the room and starts to droop back down, right? So that's why your chin is up, to hit the back of the room. That will sort of force you to be louder. Think about talking to the student in the back, who actually is in the back of the room, rather than the ones up front next to you. Now, masks muffle, which also means that we need to speak slower. And that's not bad advice to begin with, because that fast speech is difficult for people who are still learning English. And also, it's important to remember that people need time to digest what you're saying. So we are experts, and it's easy to go through our content very quickly, but students need digestion time and reflection time, and then time to actually summarize it in their notes. So speaking slower, not a bad idea anyway. And we're talking actually about slow enough that you're probably going to not be able to do all the content you thought you were going to be able to do. You're going to need to trim content. And so our office is actually recommending, when possible and when feasible, that the faculty consider moving some of the content delivery online. This is called flipping the classroom, where they use the face-to-face time for practice and they use the homework time for content, or at least the at-home time for content. And so you don't have to do that completely. You could still have some content face-to-face, but recording lectures as a voice over PowerPoint, let's say, would be one easy way to do that. You could still have all the lecture time you need, and also with PowerPoint. If you do that, we do recommend you then save the entire file as a movie file, and then you can put it in YouTube. And that's the simplest way to get it in front of students. And yes, you will need to enunciate more when you're wearing a mask, and everyone needs to enunciate more, not just you. The students need to do this too when they're talking to you and to each other, right? They need to do things like almost exaggerate how much animation they're doing with their lips, with their tongue, with their jaw. And as you see in the second bullet, your voice is much more than just the loudness. It's much more than just the clarity. It's also the energy that's in your voice and the variation you provide within your voice. And all of that will aid with people being able to hear you while you're wearing a mask. Now, if you, as the instructor, are a non-native speaker, you might want to practice out loud those difficult words ahead of time to make sure that people will be able to understand you when it counts in the classroom. So when students ask questions, the masks muffle the volume, they muffle the clarity, and perhaps they're not a native speaker. And so we need a certain set of strategies for reacting to their questions, especially if you don't understand those questions. So asking them to repeat might be what comes to mind, but it's more useful to ask them to rephrase the question. They'll choose different words, and you might get a better sense of it anyway. Another strategy is to ask the students nearby, the other students in the classroom, to do the same thing, to rephrase the question. The reason that works sometimes is that as expert, we sometimes have these blind spots. We're not sure what's difficult for the students anymore. But the students who are in the room with them, they're all roughly at the same spot. They might have a better idea about what this question is because they have a similar question in their mind. The third bullet, you should repeat the posed question in your own words, so another version of rephrasing. This is useful, again, in two ways. First, to make sure that you've correctly understood what the student's question was. And secondly, it might, if the acoustics are not great, be helpful for those students online if they weren't able to hear the question clearly in the first place. Now, if you are using PowerPoint, then you have the opportunity to put those important terms, the jargon and the vocabulary words, those sorts of things, as part of the presentation. It should be on screen to begin with, which will improve the idea or improve the accuracy of them being able to understand you. And then finally, because we're even more uncertain than normal that students understand us, an important teaching practice becomes even more important now, and that is checking whether they actually understand. You should do interactive techniques with the students. That means pausing for 30 seconds and asking them to draw a quick diagram, or pausing for 30 seconds and asking them to work with a partner to puzzle through a similar example to the one we just talked about. Or it means make everybody stand up who's in the room if it's a face-to-face class, and only sit down if you're going to vote X on a certain question you're posing in front of them. So that list that's linked on the link on the screen there has more than 200 of these ideas, and we recommend that you use them frequently to sort of verify the understanding in the first place. You'll find that this kind of practice enlivens the room and makes the day progress more easily for the students rather than just listening all the time. So a second thing masks do, in addition to muffling sounds, is they hide faces. And this creates some problems, as you can imagine. So the first bullet, the students cannot see your lips moving around, which actually makes it problematic for those who are learning English to understand your words. This is a sort of a known scientific fact that seeing somebody's mouth move makes it easier to understand them, particularly when you're learning that language. Masks also mean that your facial expressions are a little bit more hidden than they would have been otherwise. So you actually need to exaggerate your facial expressions if you want them to come through. So I didn't put it on screen, but the concept here is smile with your eyes somehow. So smile big enough that it comes through on your eyes and not just your mouth, because they can't see your mouth. The hiding of faces means that it might be harder to learn the student names. And you need a strategy for counteracting that, because it is still important, more important actually than ever, to have rapport and community in the classroom and the connection to the individual students. So you need to learn their names. So name tents would be an easy way to do this. Just ask the student to create name tents, bring it with them each time, and put it on the chair in front of them so that you have the ability to at least call them by name. And if they're always sitting in the same spot, so a seating chart, might be necessary, but students generally are monogamous to their seat anyway. They'll go back to the same spot. Over time, you'll sort of know the student names anyway. And then the final thought is to maybe get to know the students a little bit without their masks. So Flipgrid is a tool that's within Canvas, and it's like a video discussion board, basically. There's an initial video, and then people respond to it with their own video. So that's a great way to create some community even before the classroom begins. All right, let's talk about what happens when students don't want to do physical distancing or don't want to wear their mask. So the refusal to maintain those CDC requirements like distancing and masks is going to be covered by the Student Code of Conduct. Okay, so The faculty do have to be the initial level of enforcement in the classroom. That's just simply going to be a requirement of us. And it's important that we only escalate incrementally. We don't jump straight to, yelling at the student that they're in violation of the code of conduct. So remind them first that if you have a mask, you're going to need a mask. And it appears that the university is going to supply some paper masks for the faculty to bring as backups in case the student don't have one today. But you could tell the student if they really refuse to wear a mask or to physical distance that, look, my next step up here is I'm going to report you to the conflict team. We have a conflict resolution team that's still being developed, but it will be in place by the time the semester begins. And if they won't actually go put on their mask, or they refuse to do anything about it, you could tell them, go to that conflict team, and they won't leave, then call the team to come to your classroom. If the team isn't there within 10 minutes, the suggestion is that the faculty dismiss the class temporarily, tell everyone to go outside and return back in 10 or 20 minutes because the team is on the way. So eventually the student code of conduct would result in the student getting in trouble, basically. A paper trail would follow, and if the student continues to not behave and conform, they will eventually be trespassed. And so then it becomes a matter for the university police. So let's hope it doesn't come to that. Let's hope instead that physical distancing problems, for instance, can be solved by doing some tricks that we control as faculty, right? Like if there's someone inching closer and closer to a friend they have in class, maybe you change that seating chart. You swap that student with someone sitting across the room. Remember that we can't move the furniture itself, okay? So faculty do have to be the enforcers. And the reason we say that is the students, if there's somebody close to them or somebody not wearing their mask, it might make other students uncomfortable, but they might not really have the tools, the authority tools, to speak up about it. And so the faculty have to be the enforcer and have to speak up. Several things to talk about when it comes to good practices on the first day of class. One of the things we learned in our testing is that you really, really need to expect there will be challenges with the technology your first time in that classroom. The Teams interface might be useful and familiar to you, but doing it at the same time that you're controlling what the projector shows, not super easy. Knowing exactly what the camera is named in this classroom, not so easy. And as well as the person in the room before you might have changed some settings around, so you have to confirm that the settings are the way that you want them to. So that means it's going to be difficult to even find time to do the stuff you normally do, which is like jump on the internet and download your presentation for today. You should bring it with you, okay? You should update your teams before the first day of class as well. And so that's what you're seeing pictured on screen is you click on the account settings, that's your own picture, click that first. And then down near the bottom, you click check for updates. And then once Teams has been updated, it will actually be updated everywhere you go. So you could do this at home, and then when you go to the classroom, you'll get the updated version of Teams. So because all of this is going to be difficult, we actually think that you should plan for that first day to really be more about technology check. You also want to check that the students can all join the breakout rooms. You want to check that the students can all hear each other, that the students can participate by phone in the classroom. And so that's going to take a lot of time. We really think you should plan to reduce the amount of content for that first day. And there's some things you have to show students that are going to be super important. So when students are in teams, just like any of us in a Teams meeting, we normally see the gallery view. That's what you're seeing on screen, the gallery view where there's lots of little icons, or if lots of people have their video turned on, then you would see lots of little videos. And so the students, if all their videos are turned off and only the teacher is got the video running, it would look like the screen you're seeing here, meaning that it's small. The teacher's view is small. If the teacher switches to start showing PowerPoint instead of showing herself, that would be different because it would be taking over the entire screen. So if it's like the document camera, however, it would be small again. So because that's not through screen sharing, it's through whatever camera is being shown to the rest of the Teams meeting. So what the students need to do is right click actually on your part of the gallery, and select Pin. And what that would do is make the instructor's webcam then cover the whole page. It would zoom up to be the entire screen. And if that's the webcam, that's fine. But if it's a document camera, it's really important that they know how to pin that so that they can see it full screen rather than just a little tiny window. So I would take time in that first day to walk them through it and make sure they all know how to do it. I would also show the students how to turn on live captions. So live captions is a live, in the moment, capturing or translating of your spoken words into typed words at the bottom of the screen. And anyone does this, the instructor does it or the students do it by clicking on the triple dots at the top and then selecting Turn on Live Captions. Now, if you as the teacher turn that on, it's only going to do that on your screen. It's not going to do it on the student's screen. So individual students all have to do that if they want the live captions turned on. You should know these are not perfect, so they will occasionally make translation mistakes, and these are also not disability compliant, so it's not a true transcript of the session. If you are recording the session, then the live captions will also be available that students can click on while watching the recording and turn on live captions in that sense as well. Again, it's if the student needs an accommodation, however, this does not count. All right, what else do students need to know? We have found that when students use just the browser to view a Teams meeting, that it's a lot more limited. And so both for a PC, or a desktop, I guess, and for a phone, the students should be encouraged to download the full version. So download the Teams client on their desktop or download the app for their phone rather than just doing it through the browser. It's just got more features and will work more fluidly. Now, we've been hinting that it's a good practice for in-person students to join the Teams meetings also. But one of the things we discovered in testing is that it can create echo. They probably knew to mute their microphone, but they also need to mute their speaker because otherwise the echo still comes in. Okay, we just talked about live captions the students need to do. And then you should also consider providing them with some guides that we have created, things like etiquette for being in Teams meetings, or things like study practices that students should be following, or suggestions for how they should use their time before and during and after each of the hybrid meetings. So we've got individual guides there, and what you'll see when you click on that link is a zip file that contains all of them. We recommend you just put these directly into your Canvas course for the students so they have access to them there. And we're still talking about first day of class, right? So you should be building first day community. You should be building rapport with the students. It's a critical thing to do on the first day of class anyway, in any event, and before we had these unique situations and circumstances. But it's going to be even more important now because of the awkwardness of the situation. And speaking of the awkwardness, that's our first bullet. We think you ought to just announce it up front. Look, we know this is different. We know this is going to be difficult, and we know this is weird. But we've got to get through it. And so let's jointly develop this code of what we're going to do. We're going to agree that we're going to wear masks. These are going to be your responsibilities. These are going to be my responsibilities. So one of them, for instance, is that the students are going to be asked, as it tells them in the student guide issued from the president's office, that they should be wiping down their own areas. That's a responsibility they have, that no one's going to be cleaning the classrooms between uses. And as we mentioned earlier, first day of class community is being built when you learn their names and when you do group work, when you do activities, as opposed to just listening to the instructor. So now, not necessarily thinking about first day of class, but all of the above, everything we've been talking about, there are several places you can get assistance. So ATLE, the Academy for Teaching and Learning Excellence, that's our office, supporting the face-to-face and hybrid side of things, has the email you see in front of you. Innovative Education is the department that supports the online functions for teaching. They have both an email address that you see there, as well as live assistance. So from 9 to 5, Monday through Friday, there's basically a Teams meeting they can join and ask a question live. So it's like instant help that they get. In fact, there's multiple people in that live assistance. And then Instructional Technology has its own website with several remote guides for using remote technologies. So If you have any questions, we recommend that you simply email atlee@usf.edu, and we will get back to you as expeditiously as we can. Wish you good luck teaching in this modality or these modalities. You might be in several different ones. We know it will be a challenge, but we are confident in the strength and character of our USF faculty and our staff and our students, actually. So we will get through this together and with a smile on our faces, because that's what we do. Go Bulls!